This time, the show threw us a bone. Finish the challenge, and you get a catfish. It's huge. It's probably bigger than my calf. Plus, there's honey to eat. Life's pretty sweet right now. Of course, some people are crazy enough to wash their hair with monkey urine. I'm really curious to see what happens next. Let's watch together. On day 12, after Lindsay's exit, Danny and Gary felt the pressure mount. They need to find food to boost their energy, but the only appetizing option is baobab leaves. Gary quickly climbed up to gather some. Danny quickly threw a bag up to him. Being a vegetarian, he was quite happy about it. The team has 2 bows and arrows. Danny doesn't hunt, so Gary is thinking about trading with other teams. Danny tasted the leaves. They were quite delicious. Gary wanted to pick more food and almost fell, scaring Danny so much he didn't dare to breathe. Gary kept at it, gathering more leaves. Honestly, no matter how much they eat, it won't be enough. They still need meat, so Brent is fishing. Earlier, there was a disagreement about eating fish given by others. This led to some awkwardness. Even though everyone is a competitor, they're still on the same team. He wants to grab some food to break the tension, but the fish are tough to catch. Unlike Fernando, who easily nets fish, life is improving without other contestants around. Out of nowhere, Brent appeared. Danny and the crew hurriedly packed and left, not wanting anyone else to discover their treasure spot. They eat fish daily. If only one could win, they'd be the strongest team. Recently, the baboons have been louder, making it hard for anyone to sleep. They're afraid the baboons will come to the camp to play. Finally, on the 13th day, they saw the baboons leave. It's really unnerving. Jeff is desperate for a bow and arrow. He's going nuts eating salad every day. He hopes Gary can trade for the bow and arrow soon, but they have nothing useful to trade. They have to wait for the show to arrange another equipment contest. Darling discovered a new task notice. In 2 days, they have to relocate, packing up everything. The new location has more dangerous animals, but also more food. They need to stock up on food in the next few days. Otherwise, they could pass out from hunger while moving. Gary sees this as a chance to maybe knock out some competitors. Jeff is up to no good again. Keith is organizing a hunting event, but Brent doesn't want to waste too much energy. So he stayed behind. Keith has his eyes on a piglet. If they can hunt it, the move will be no problem. But hunting isn't easy. Any noise or scent could alert the animal. Keith is observing from a distance, just waiting for them to come closer, within shooting range, about 10 meters away. Even catching one would be enough to eat. However, Keith missed his target. Darling thought it would have been better if he had used it. The delicious bacon slipped away. Dank plans to hunt some big game. He thinks fish alone isn't enough. But not everyone agrees with Dank. After all, fishing is a stable food source, while hunting is too risky. Dank is already practicing with his bow and arrow, confident he'll catch any prey that shows up. Tracy and Fernando gripe that Dank is too bossy, ignores their input, and hogs the tools. If this keeps up, they'll be sidelined. Tracy urges Fernando to stand up and claim their share. Fernando doesn't really agree with this backstabbing behavior, but he doesn't say much and just watches Tracy complain. Jeff eyes the baboons in the trees, longing to hunt and taste them, but without a bow and arrow, he can only watch them leap around. Fighting them up close is impossible. They're too fierce and even challenge lions. Jeff fears they'll attack him in his sleep. He didn't sleep well all night. On the 14th day of the challenge, Jeff feels the baboons are getting more aggressive. Luckily, they can leave this place tomorrow, but today he aims to gather more food. Sadly, the fruits aren't ripe yet. Then, he spots bees buzzing around the trees. There must be food up there. Some white substance is dripping down. It's definitely honey. This rare African treat is too good to share, so they sneak up to grab the honey. The best part is these bees don't sting, so there's no worry about getting stung. Gary is already thanking nature for its gift. He's quite skilled at harvesting honey, not afraid of bee stings at all. It's like he was born to do this. First, he threw a rope over the tree to secure it. Next, he had to pull this section down, but it was really sturdy. Finally, he climbed up and chopped it off. Danny tugged it gently from below, and it fell. Now they can enjoy the honey. Dank is set to hunt, hoping to snag some antelope. He's already at their prepped ambush spot. Fernando believes having too much gear is a problem. He's concerned they might need to reorganize and share supplies. But Dank thinks having this bow and arrow set is enough. After waiting for what felt like forever, an animal finally passed by, but it ran too fast. Dank couldn't get a good shot, so he has to keep waiting. Meanwhile, Gary has successfully harvested the honey. It's absolutely delicious. If only they had some bread to go with it. Danny is quite pleased with it. It's a fast food lover's dream, 100% natural with no additives. Gary feels rejuvenated. They plan to eat all the honey, boosting their confidence for tomorrow's move. Brent stays at the shelter. He's trying to gather as much firewood as possible for the night. Keith and Darren are still waiting for prey. Patience is key in bow hunting. An antelope has entered shooting range. Darren seizes the opportunity and shoots an arrow, but it just misses. The nearby animals are scared off and flee. They have to return empty-handed. Brent is worried about the tough relocation tomorrow. He's worried he might collapse from exhaustion. Meanwhile, Trick found some honey but wishes he had an axe. A few chops would bring it down. He's debating whether to trade with another group, hoping to get some honey in return. He heads to Dank's group first. They negotiate and agree. Then, they plan to tell Gary. Gary is still eyeing the honey above, wanting to get it all down. He tries using a rope first. Suddenly, a distant noise catches his attention. Gary hurriedly gathers his tools, surprised by the unexpected crowd. How much honey will everyone get? Gary thinks it's a good idea. He hasn't tasted this honey yet. Danny just smiles and says nothing. The group heads to the beehive, needing to chop it down. I must say, the show's axes are excellent. One swing and it's done. The honey is delicious. Everyone gets a nice energy boost. Despite being in close quarters, sharing food like this is really nice. Every time Dank gets some honey, he ends up with a bit more than everyone else. Danny finds this absolutely hilarious. Now, sneaking honey with Gary, they're both over the moon. Meanwhile, Jeff is once again facing off with the baboons. It feels like an attack could happen any second. Around 30 of them are jumping around up there. I just hope we can last until dawn before we leave. The worst part is, Fei started to ***. This made Jeff angry that all the hair was all over and I wanted to get a knife and cut them right away. Jeff is now covered in the smell of urine, and Trick thinks it's so hilarious, and he's going to wake up all night with the scent. Jeff wants to shave his head when he returns because it's full of seeds and debris. Despite being grossed out, Trick helps him clean it up. Fortunately, I can leave here tomorrow, otherwise, sooner or later, I will be disgusted by Fei. You and Gary can hear Jeff screams here. I'm glad there are no baboons here. Jeff is over there yelling helplessly, while the baboons above are having a blast. We had no choice but to call the show crew for help. I'm concerned the baboons might target our shelter. We should try scaring them off with some boxes. Things are really serious here. Jeff's head is still wet with urine. For safety, they stayed at Gary's. This challenge has been tough. Gary didn't expect someone to come, so late smell the smell of boiling from afar. It took me a long time to make it to the 15th day. Today, they can finally leave this place without trouble. Thankfully, Jeff missed the hidden honey, so Gary and Danny can keep their energy up. When Jeff and the others got back to the shelter, it was a total disaster. Baboons had left droppings everywhere, and all our collected leaves were ruined. Everything was ruined, and they just wanted to leave quickly. Keith's group had already packed up. Brent's in bad shape. Despite drinking plenty of water, he still feels very dehydrated. This time, he might actually faint, but he has to push through the discomfort and keep going. Only Dank's group seems to have any energy and spirit right now. Having too many items can be a hassle, especially since Dank insists on carrying everything himself. This really annoys Tracy. She feels like she can't give her best effort. If this keeps up, there's no chance of winning the prize money like this. They should really reshuffle the teams. Moving isn't easy for the contestants. They could face wild animal attacks and risk dehydration from the heat. To keep everyone safe, everyone must stick together to avoid wildlife conflicts. Not long into the walk, Brent's foot started hurting badly, and his body was getting weaker. Who knows if anyone will collapse during the move? Everyone was exhausted. After what seemed like an eternity, they finally arrived. All they wanted was to collapse and rest. But the show had different ideas. Were they really starting a challenge now? Instead, they split the teams, and now it was every person for themselves. They had to craft a 4-pronged spear and catch a catfish, which was the real challenge. No one knew how many catfish were in the pond, and the contestants had just moved, so their stamina was really being tested. The last to finish would be out. Everyone perked up. Brent, already dehydrated, felt singled out by the challenge. Before the challenge, they had to give up their items, which they could win back later. Jeff was thrilled about this. They'd pick tools based on how fast they finished. Dank felt awful, but Jeff was eager to snag the bow and arrow. They hurried to make their spears. The quality and shape of the wood were crucial. Next, they had to carve the prongs and attach them to the stick. After tying it with rope and sharpening the tips, Darling figured it was simple if you had hands. He wasn't too concerned about catching the catfish. Dank had already picked his materials. Jeff aimed to be in the top to ensure he got the bow and arrow. He had made and caught fish before, so he hoped to finish quickly this time. Trick also really wanted the bow and arrow. Keith had already prepared his stick. His strategy was to make the spearhead at the pond. Brent was feeling awful. He didn't even have the strength to cut down a tree. It looked like this round was his. Tracy had never made or used one before. He watched others while looking for materials. Gary grabbed a piece of deadwood and got to work. As long as it was hard enough, it would do. Working in such high temperatures made the contestants very irritable. They wanted to smash the sticks to pieces. Sharpening alone didn't cut it. Fire hardening was key. Darling and Dank were the quickest so far. Everyone's eager to earn the bow and arrow. Trick's struggling, the wood's just too tough to cut. He's really anxious because he's not skilled with a knife, making it tough for him. Brent, despite feeling awful, keeps pushing through. Even if he finishes this challenge, his body might give out later. He rests under a tree shade. Do you think he can still make a comeback? Brent, despite his heavy breathing, keeps pushing on. Gary picked a new piece of wood but is lagging behind. To get the bow and arrow, he needs to speed up his crafting. Darren has already made his spear. Next, he needs to start a fire to harden it. Only then can the spear pierce the catfish. Each contestant has a fire pit to start a fire. When Darren gets his fire going, the other contestants are still busy making their spears. His advantage is very clear. Dank has also finished sharpening his spear. He may not finish first, but if he makes the top 4, he'll earn a bow and arrow. Meanwhile, Fernando is starting his fire. The other contestants are lagging behind. Keith hasn't begun sharpening his spear yet and needs to speed up. Trick has taken a long time positioning the scorpion. To win the bow and arrow, he must hope the others are slow at catching fish. Jeff has just completed his spear. Despite his anxiety, he must remain composed. A single error could cost him the bow and arrow. Surprisingly, Gary has already lit his fire, determined to keep his chance at the bow and arrow. Meanwhile, Darren, with his spear hardened, is now hunting the catfish. He's far ahead of the others. He dives into the water pit and quickly finds the catfish. Although catching it by hand takes some time, for Darren, it's no big deal. He gets the catfish onto the shore and spears it. Now Darren can go for the tool challenge. Soon, he can eat this fish. The catfish hit him hard during the catch, causing pain. Hopefully, it's just temporary and not a serious injury. Fernando has also finished hardening his spear. Dank is extremely anxious, worried he won't get the bow and arrow. There are only 3 bows left. The competition is getting fiercer. Jeff is even more anxious. Watching others start their fires, Jeff fears missing out on a bow and arrow. Meanwhile, Fernando dives into the water pit and quickly finds a catfish. He quickly finds a catfish, feeling thrilled. Someone else is about to claim another bow and arrow. The competition is about to get even tougher. Fernando feels pretty strong and believes he's one step closer to the prize. Dank has tempered his spear. If all goes well, he'll secure the 3rd bow and arrow. Now is not the time to relax. He needs to hurry and get the catfish, even though it's a bit small. As long as he finishes the challenge, it's okay. Only 1 bow and arrow remains. Who will claim it? Brent is still in the game. He's enduring the discomfort to make a spear, but his dehydration is getting worse. Tracy is also very anxious. He fears elimination. Danny is also lagging. One of the 3 will likely be out. Gary didn't think survival would be his main issue, but it's consuming his time. Jeff notices others starting fires nearby. He believes he can still catch up. Trick is also struggling to start a fire, growing increasingly anxious. Whoever starts the fire first can temper their spear first. Everyone is giving it their all. Jeff throws the rope into the fire. No one knows survival like Jeff, but Trick gets his fire going first. He's ready to sprint, just waiting for the tempering to finish. Soon, Trick dashes to the water pit. Jeff finally gets his fire going. He hopes Trick won't catch the catfish, but reality hits hard. Trick has already speared it. Hearing Trick's excited shout, Jeff knows he won't get the bow and arrow. He can only speed up to complete the challenge and rest. He takes out his frustration on the catfish, pondering his next tool choice. He hopes they avoid picking the bow and arrow. Gary has finally lit his fire. Keith is already tempering. Now, he needs to catch the catfish. Brent, exhausted and unlucky, has just completed his spear. He desperately needs rest and might wait for the crew to tell him to leave. Tracy feels a bit relieved seeing Danny still struggling next door. Keith has already caught the catfish. He spears the catfish hard. Finally, he can have a good meal. Gary has just finished tempering his spear. To catch the catfish faster, he dives in and grabs it. Even without a bow and arrow, a catfish dinner is enough. Next, we'll find out who gets eliminated. Brent seems the most likely. He's pushing on despite his exhaustion. Tracy just started a fire, but Brent has already caught up. The staff is worried something might happen to him. They've been watching closely, while Danny is still crafting a spear. Without Brent's help, he'd surely be out by now. Tracy has already caught a fish. Brent needs to hang in there, but he's in really bad shape. The doctor has halted the challenge, but you must wait until Brent is attended to before proceeding. The other contestants are still unaware of the situation. You can see a group of people gathered around Brent. His condition is worse than expected. He can't see anything. He can hardly hear the staff. They quickly called for a rescue vehicle. It's the first time the production team has intervened. The situation is probably worse than imagined. They don't know who is in trouble, and everyone is very anxious. Brent has to quit the challenge and head home. He's upset about being carried out like this. I'm curious if this means Danny won't be eliminated. Tracy and Danny are also feeling bad about this. Surviving in the wild is not as easy as it seems. Anyone could be the next one to be carried out, both mentally and physically. Brent has reached his limit. He can't continue. Although Danny won't be eliminated, he still has to complete the challenge. The other contestants are very worried about this. This challenge is tougher than before. Physical condition matters, willpower alone won't cut it. The contestants can now choose their tools and form groups. I didn't expect Darren to choose fishing gear. Fernando, Dank, and Trick all chose bows and arrows. Jeff was thrilled to get a bow and arrow. Keith had to settle for fishing gear. Gary took an axe, Tracy took a blanket for warmth, and Danny got nothing. The upcoming groupings are interesting. 3 people will form a group, Darren, Trick, and Keith, with both bows and fishing gear. Dank will team up with Jeff and Tracy, and he's not happy about it. The remaining group is Gary, Fernando, and Danny. How do you feel about these teams? Let's anticipate the next challenges together.